I welcome you all to the module 5 of this course, which is titled as Applied Positive Psychology. So the module 5 is about, it will be around the concept of psychological strengths and assets. So this is the first lecture of this module, and overall this is lecture number 13. So today's lecture is titled as Character Strengths, Concepts, Theories and Interventions. So we'll be talking about a specific concept related to strengths, which is called as character strengths, and the different concepts and interventions associated with that concept we'll be talking about in today's lecture. So before we talk about today's lecture, let me give you a brief recap of the last lecture. So in the last lecture, which was part of the earlier module, that is module number 4, which was revolving around the concept of psychology of flow and mindfulness. So in the last lecture was more specifically related to understanding the connection between the flow and mindfulness, and some of the specific interventions related to flow and mindfulness. So in that context, we have discussed the various interventions and the factors that we can consider while increasing or facilitating the process of flow. So we discuss varieties of factors that should be taken care while in any situation to facilitate the flow experience. We also discussed what is the relationship between flow and mindfulness. In that context, we try to understand that mindfulness is more used in the context of training your mind to experience in such a way that mindful state could be an important facilitator for flow to happen. So we discussed varieties of differences and connection between these two concepts, and at the end we discussed how certain mindfulness based therapeutic interventions that are available, that the varieties of therapies available where mindfulness as an important strategy or as a concept is integrated within the therapeutic interventions. So these are some of the things that we have discussed in the last lecture. So in today's lecture, we'll be focusing on the concept of the meaning of psychological strengths and what are their benefits. We'll also talk about, there is one particular classification system of strengths which are called character strengths, the VIA classification of character strengths and virtues. We'll also look at how character strengths are connected to the concept of happiness and well-being, and at the end we'll be talking about how can we cultivate character strengths. So this will be the major focus of today's lecture. So let's start today's lecture. So let us start with the concept of what are strengths in a psychological sense. When we talk about strengths, psychological strengths, what do we mean by that? So there are certain ways to look at it. So one of the ways we can understand strength is that psychological strengths are built-in capacities for certain thoughts, feelings and behaviors. So basically when we talk about psychological strengths, we are talking about certain inbuilt capacities that human beings have, and those capacities could manifest itself in terms of thoughts, in terms of certain feelings or in terms of certain actions. So when we talk about psychological strength, some of the examples could be when people show things like courage, optimism, perseverance, gratitude and so on. These are all different expression of strength that people have in the psychological sense. So these are like those strengths are inbuilt within all of us. It can be facilitated, it can be enhanced and so on. So the study of strengths are foundational agenda for positive psychology because they reflect positive side of human functioning. So when we talk about positive psychology, one of the central idea or concept around which positive psychology revolve is psychological strength, because it is one of the most central positive concepts which can help us to understand the positive dimensions of human behavior. So that is why it is a very important component of positive psychology. Now, why should we understand psychological strengths? What are the benefits of studying psychological strength? So when we talk about benefits of understanding or using psychological strengths in our life, so there are numerous benefits that we can gain out of using or understanding psychological strengths. Some of these are listed here, which was listed by Bonnewell in one of her book, which summarizes values and functions of strength. So what are the important values and function of strength? One is that strength encourages insights and perspective in life. So whenever we understand strength, whatever strength we have, or when we use certain strength that we all have in our life, it gives us more insights about ourselves, that we understand better, that we also have these strengths. Because these are certain qualities that also defines human beings. So that gives us better insights about oneself, understanding of self, and so on. So it also gives you a perspective in life in terms of understanding life and how to behave, where to proceed, and so on. So strength directs lots of human behavior. Second is, psychological strengths makes one less sensitive to stress. So the more strengths you have, varieties of strength, particularly some of the strengths which, for example, the sense of resilience and so on, such kind of strength will help us to deal with problems or challenges or stressful situations of life, because whenever you are in a stressful or traumatic situation, we become much more vulnerable. At that time, if you have certain inner strength, that will help you to deal with all these problems of life. Strengths also generate optimism and resilience. In a sense, whenever you have certain strengths, certain resources within you, you are more optimistic that you will be able to handle situation, you will be more resilient to deal with situations and so on. Strength also provide a sense of direction. In a sense, when you have certain strengths and resources within you, you know that I can go in this direction and achieve my goals and so on. So it can also give you sense of direction in many situations. Strengths also help to develop confidence and self-esteem. Obviously, when you have certain psychological strengths, they are also connected to your confidence and self-esteem. So you may be more confident in doing things, and it may enhance your sense of self-esteem. Strengths also generates a sense of vitality and energy, because strengths by definition means it gives you energy. It gives you a vitality, a sense of positive outlook towards life. Strength also stimulates a sense of happiness and fulfillment. When you use more and more strength, you get a lot of happiness out of it, because you are good at doing something, so it automatically is connected to happiness and fulfillment. Strength also helps to achieve one's goals. So achievement of goals can be facilitated by a lot of strength that we all have. It also enables one to be more engaged at work and perform better. So when you do some tasks which are in line with your strengths, you are more likely to get engaged, because you are good at it, you have strength, so you are more likely to put focus and attention, more energy, more engagement, and so on. So there are diverse benefits when, in terms of understanding what are the strengths we have, and if you use them more and more, all these benefits can come into one's life. So development and following one's strength can build resilience, prevent psychological illnesses. So these are like some other extension of those benefits. Following one's strength and build can resilience and prevent psychological illnesses. For example, developing optimism may buffer against depression. Let's say some of the psychological disorders are related to certain problems in the thoughts. For example, depressed people are mostly, one of the main characteristics of depression is that a lot of pessimistic thoughts are there within those people, because their future looks dark and they become hopeless and those kind of thing. So in such situation, let's say if you can develop or help these people to develop certain strengths of thought, like optimistic thoughts and so on, it will help them to at least prevent some of the depressive episodes and so on. So because when you are optimistic, you cannot be depressed. So certain strength can by definition be work or prevent certain psychological disorders, emotional problems, and so on. So strength approach underlies most successful psychological therapies, such as instilling hope, optimism, courage, etc. in clients. If you look at most of the psychological therapies and counseling principles, most of them are actually connected with building some strengths among the clients. Because people come to therapies, or a lot of psychological disorder happens when people become vulnerable and they don't have the energy and strength to face situations of their life. So then in such situations, a lot of this vulnerable position, people are more likely to get into a lot of psychological disorders and so on. So a lot of these therapies are actually associated with, in some way, directly or indirectly, instilling certain strengths within themselves by either strengths of thoughts, emotions, or actions, and so on. Like they may indirectly or directly instill hope, optimism, courage within those clients, so that they can face the problems of their life and become more resilient and so on. Now, in psychology, how do we understand strength? So, there are different approaches to understand strength. There are different theoretical approaches. Some of these theoretical approach that we'll be talking about in this particular module. Uh, Typically, these three we'll be discussing in this module. One is VIA classification of strengths and virtues, which will be the focus of today's lecture. So, this is what we'll be discussing in today's lecture. The other lecture will focus on Gallup's strength finders and CAP's realized to 4M model. These are all models that talks about and how to understand strengths, how to develop them, what are their importance and so on, with a different theoretical perspective. So the today's lecture will be focusing on the first one, that is called BIA classification of strengths and virtues. Here, more specifically, we'll be talking about something called as a character strength, strengths of character, not just a general strengths. Other two will be discussing in the next lecture. So let us talk about VIA classification of strengths and virtues. Now, this classification was developed by these two persons named Peterson and Seligman in 2004. They developed a classification system of strengths and virtues taking cue from DSM called value in action classification. So VIA means value in action classification. So they took this idea from DSM, so Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So DSM has elaborately classified psychological disorders into the different categories, subcategories and so on. So they took an idea from there. If you can divide and classify disorders, why not can we also classify all human strengths? If you can classify weaknesses and disorders, why not we also classify the strengths that human being can have? So out of this whole exercise, this whole VIA classification system came into existence, which basically means value in action. Classification. So the DSM classifies mental disorders, VIA classifies character strengths and virtues. So they took idea from there. So basically in VIA they did an elaborate classification of different strengths of character that human being can display. So these character strengths are those aspects of personality that are morally valued. So when we talk about character strengths, these are not just psychological strengths. We are talking about those strengths where there is a moral value in it. So that is why they are called strengths of character. So there is some connotation of morally accepted moral values are attached to it. So we look for good characters as a desirable quality in all people, including leaders, teachers, students, across all sections of society. We all expect that people should have good characters or strengths of good character, which are desirable qualities, morally desirable good qualities. This is generally we all expect from other people. So this particular classification actually deals with those kind of character strengths, which are like morally desirable and general expectation from all people that we expect. Now, academic skills and abilities such as thinking critically help people to achieve goals. But without good character strengths or good character, individuals may lack the desire to do right thing in their life. So this is how one should understand why this understanding character strengths is so important. Now, we have many other strengths like strengths of thoughts, like you may have a lot of skills, critical thinking abilities and so on. Now these things help you to achieve goals. But if you don't have character strengths, you may not have intention to do right things in life. So one may achieve a lot of higher goal in one's life because of certain strengths in their thought processes and critical abilities and thinking abilities. But the person, if they lack character strengths, probably they will fall from there because they may do wrong things in their life. So in a sense, character strengths are very important for overall enhancing quality of life or emotional aspects of life, or enhancing happiness and life satisfaction and so on. Those well-being indicators are more linked to character strengths. So even if you have very good, or maybe genius in terms of using mental abilities and so on, that doesn't guarantee success in life or sustainable happiness in one's life if you lack character strengths in sense, because you will not have the intention to do the right things. So in that context, character strengths are very important in our life. So this is what this classification does in terms of understanding varieties of character strengths which are important. So according to Park and Peterson, exercising character strengths prevents undesirable life outcomes because it is very important for positive life outcomes in terms of emotions, well-being, happiness and so on. Specific strengths of character, which we'll be talking about all these character, what are the different classification system. Certain character strengths like kindness, social intelligence, self-control, etc. buffer against the negative effects of stress and trauma. So this also has many connotation for adjustment to life and dealing with the problems of life. Certain character strengths are very important like hope, kindness, social intelligence, self-control and so on. It also helps people to thrive when they're associated with desired outcomes such as school success, leadership, tolerance and valuing diversity, ability to delay gratification, kindness, altruism and so on, helping behavior and so on. So it also has diverse outcomes, not only related to the well-being and so on, even in performance setting also certain character strengths leads to higher performance in schools and so on also. So we'll look at some of these things. So Peterson and Seligman, who developed this whole classification system, they used certain criteria that which strengths should be included in the list and which should be excluded. So they use certain criteria because there are so many such character strengths, we cannot include everything. So they used few criteria that in order to include them in the classification system or in the list, they should have certain characteristics. So they use these following characteristics to include any character strength in the list or in the classification system. One is that character strength should be ubiquitous, which basically means it should be widely recognized across culture. So only those character strengths were included in the classification system which are widely recognized in the across different cultures. So this should not be only just culture specific. Second is they include only those character strengths which are related to fulfillment, which means they should contribute to individual fulfillment, satisfaction and happiness broadly constructed. So when all these character strengths should contribute to the fulfillment of one's life satisfaction, happiness, so emotional well-being and so on. The third criteria they use that it should be morally valued. So only those character strengths should be included in the classification system which are morally valued in its own right and not for tangible outcomes. Whether they give you certain outcome or not, that is a secondary thing, but in its first important thing is that they are morally valued, that people desire these qualities among other people in order to call them as a good human being and so on. Third is it should not diminish others. So when you use these character strengths, because you are showing this character strength, it should not diminish other people. So your expression of character strength will not make other people less or in any sense diminish them. So it should elevate others who witness it, producing admiration, not jealousy. So character strength, when you show them, they will not diminish other people. They will, on the other hand, they will elevate other people by saying that they will get more encouraged and so on, inspired and so on. So that should be another characteristics. The last characteristic they said that to be called something as character strength, it should has a non-felicitous opposite. That means has obvious antonyms that are negative. So if you have a certain character strengths, so it will have some opposite spectrum to it also. So for example, let's say hope. So there will be hopeless as an opposite thing. So most of these character strength will have an opposite construct to it also. So they use these criteria to list out the possible character strengths that are important in the human life, and they made a elaborate classification system out of it. So there are few more also they listed. They should be trait-like the individual difference with so they should be like stable characteristics. So it should not be like one day you show a character and after that you are not showing it. Then it cannot be called a character strength. It has to be a stable character of the person. By and large, most of the situation the person should show that in a long-term sense and a relatively permanent sense. Then only it becomes a part of that character. If you just show it sometimes and you don't show it most of the time, then it is not a part of character strengths. Then they also use some measurable characteristics, because to do research we need measurable qualities. Has been successfully measured by researcher as an individual difference. It should be distinct, is not redundant conceptually and empirically with other character strengths. Each character strength should be distinct from other. They should not be overlapping. Has paragons, which means is strikingly embodied in some individual. Some individuals will strikingly have those character strengths which can be visible and define that person based on those character strengths. Has prodigies, which is similar to that, is preconsciously shown by some children or even youth. Some people will show this in a very strong way that it is visible this person has these character strengths. Can be selectively absent. Some people will have, it may be completely missing in some people, some individuals, these character strengths, or has enabling institutions. So is the deliberate target of societal practices and rituals that try to cultivate it. So these character strengths in a larger societal and community level also, institutional level also, they will have an enabling capacity in terms of people will aspire them to be part of institutions, societies and so on. So all these characteristics, they made a list and accordingly they listed out certain character strengths and made classification. So let us look into this whole classification system. So this is called VIA classification, means value in action classification system. So using all these criteria that we discussed earlier, Peterson and Seligman identified 24 character strengths which are organized into 6 major virtues. So 6 virtues were then divided into 24 character strengths. So that means the virtue is a broader construct. Each of these virtues are again divided into specific character strengths. So this is how they made this classification. So there are 6 virtues. All these 6 are then divided into subcategories which are called as character strengths. In total, when combined, it becomes 24 character strengths. So these virtues are the more core universal characteristics valued by moral philosophers and religious thinkers such as wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, transcendence and so on. So virtues are more core universal values which are morally desirable, more broader constructs, and these character strengths are more specific expression of them. These character strengths are the specific psychological processes or mechanism that define the virtues such as kindness and love are aspects of humanity. So humanity is a virtue. Under these there may be character strengths of love, kindness. So these are character strengths. This is virtue. So this is virtue is a broader term. Character strengths are more specific expression of that virtue. So this is how they define these terms. So let us look into their classification very quickly because we cannot go into the details of all these things. It will take a lot of time. We'll just list out what are the things they have just listed within each of these virtues and what are the character strengths. So virtues and corresponding strengths are listed here. The first virtue they included in the classification system is called wisdom and knowledge. This is a broad virtue which are like desirable thing that in a moral sense this is a desirable virtue. So this includes positive traits related to acquisition and use of information in the service of good life. So when you use the knowledge or information from the world and use this information for the service of the good of life. So that's called wisdom and knowledge. In psychological language, these are cognitive strengths, like strengths of thought processes. When you have knowledge, that means you have strength in your thought processes. So there are 5 character strengths under the wisdom and knowledge category. So this is the virtue. Under these are 5 character strengths which listed under this category. So these are all related to wisdom and virtue, broadly speaking. So under wisdom and virtue or knowledge, the character strengths included are creativity, thinking of novel and productive ways of doing things, then curiosity, taking an interest in all the ongoing experience, open-mindedness, thinking things through and examining them from all sides, not just rigid, from all perspective, love for learning, mastering new skills, topics, bodies of knowledge, Perspective taking, being able to provide wise counsel to others. You understand the perspective of other people and then you can tell them what is the right things to do and so on. So these are specific expression of wisdom and knowledge, which is a broader virtue, and when it can be expressed in a character strength in these particular categories. So this is one virtue. So we have total 6 virtues. Second is called courage. Courage is a virtue, broader virtue, which means it involves the exercise of will to accomplish goals in the face of opposition, whether external or internal. So courage is basically, it's your ability to, your will to accomplish goals, your ability to accomplish goals in the face of difficulties. So whenever there are struggles, obstacles, difficulties in life, how are you able to face them and achieve your goal despite all these problems? So that's the reflection of courage. Now courage can be expressed in terms of certain specific character strengths, like it may require something called as an honesty. So these are like broad things which can be connected to courage. Speaking the truth and presenting oneself in a genuine way also requires a lot of courage. The courage can be expressed in honesty also, because it is not easy to be honest in all situations. You need a lot of courage to be honest, because sometimes honesty may invite a lot of problems in one's life. So honesty can be an important expression of courage. Bravery, this is a direct expression of courage, not shrinking from threat, challenge, difficulty or pain. So whenever problems and difficulties comes, you don't shrink, you still face and go on with the struggles and so on. The persistence is finishing what one starts. Your ability to pursue things which you think valuable, whatever problem even comes, once you start, you try to finish them as much as possible. The jest is approaching life with excitement and energy. So courage get also expressed in terms of jest, where you approach life. So your approach towards life is very positive with a lot of energy and excitement. So these are the 4 expressions of courage which can be called as character strengths. The third one is called humanity, the virtue of humanity, and under this there are 3 character strengths. So humanity includes things like related to interpersonal strengths. How do you relate with people? What is your relationship with people? So that is what humanity as a virtue expresses. How do you express your relationship with other people? So it may include things like kindness, so doing favors and good deeds for others. So you have a good intention for other people, so that is maybe expressed in terms of helping other people or supporting other people and so on. So that is called kindness. Then love, valuing close relations with other people. So when you value the relationship, express it in a very positive way, those broadly can be called as a love. Then comes something called as social intelligence, which means being aware of the motives and feelings of self and others. The more understanding of yourselves and others, motives and feelings, and understanding perspective of other people, so that is called social intelligence. So you are not just intelligent only in thinking process, but you also understand other people, understand yourself, and accordingly you behave, so that is called as social intelligence. So you are more intelligent in social situations. So those are all expressions of humanity as a virtue, and they can be called as a specific character strengths or expression of humanity. The fourth one is called justice, which basically includes civic strengths related to civic sense and so on. So justice is a virtue that can express itself in a specific character strengths like fairness, treating all people the same according to the notions of fairness and justice. So when you are fair in your dealings with people, you don't discriminate people based on whatever categories they belong to, and you believe in just behavior and giving justice to people and so on. So that's expression of fairness. Leadership is very also strongly related to the concept of justice. A true leader will always believe in justice, organizing group activities and seeing that they happen. So that is also ability of a leader, because they have to deal with other people, and justice will always be important part of leadership qualities and so on. Teamwork, working well as members of the group or team, more able to go along with other people and work as a group and team. So that is called teamwork. That is also part of justice. So justice will facilitate teamwork and leadership and so on. So these are a specific expression of justice, virtue, and this specific expression are character strengths associated with that. The fifth one is called temperance, which includes strengths that buffer us against excesses in life. So temperance means you have an ability of self-control. Don't go into the excess of anything. So that's called temperance. It is expressed in terms of various specific character strengths. One expression could be forgiveness. So forgiving those who have done wrong. So you don't go into the extreme of jealousy and taking revenge and so on. You tend to also forgive people wherever possible. So that is also an expression of temperance. You don't go into the excess or extremes of anything. Modesty, letting one's accomplishments speak for themselves. You don't just start advertising all the time that you have achieved this and that. So those are like lack of temperance expressed in people when they show too much and advertise too much about their achievements and so on. So modesty means just opposite to that. You don't speak too much, but your actions and automatically will speak about that. So that's called modesty. Prudence is about being careful about one's choices, not saying or doing things that might later be regretted. So prudence means the person is very careful in their choices in life in terms of what they speak and so on. So more careful, carrying yourself and behaving very carefully and so on. So you don't say anything that you later regret without really thinking about them and so on. So it is about whatever choice you do in life, you do it very carefully and with giving reflections and so on. Self-regulation is also very important and core of temperance, which means regulating what one feels and does. So you are also able to regulate your emotions, your thought processes, and you mold it according to the situation. You don't, for example, if you are angry, it doesn't mean you show your anger in every situation. No. So you are able to control it and express it according to the needs of the situation and so on. So these are all expressions of temperance, and these are all specific character strengths associated with that. The last one is called transcendence. This is more related to the concept of connecting to the larger universe. So more related to spirituality and so on. So transcendence as a virtue, when you are more also going into the domains of life where you connect with the larger universe. You are not just thinking about your own life, but you are going beyond and connecting to the larger universe and so on. So that can be expressed in terms of appreciation of beauty and excellence, like more higher refined things. So noticing and appreciating beauty, excellence, skill, performance in all domains of life. So this can be an expression of transcendence, that you appreciate beauty, excellence, subtle things, aesthetics of life and so on. Gratitude also could be an expression of transcendence, when being aware of and thankful for the good things that happens. When you connect with the larger universe, people also become grateful and so on. They see how things are happening and the role of higher powers and so on. So that is where gratitude may emerge. Hope, expecting the best and working to achieve it, is an expression of transcendence. Transcendence may also be linked to humor, in a sense like liking to laugh and joke, bringing smile to other people. That also can be an expression of it. Religiousness and spirituality also could be connected to transcendence. Mostly it is connected to spiritual aspects. So having coherent beliefs about higher purpose and meaning in life. So religiousness or spirituality is connected to higher power, meaning in life, and overall what is the purpose of existence and so on. Those kind of things are associated with that concept. And transcendence is directly connected to those things. So these are 6 virtues they talked about and the specific expression of them in terms of character strengths. So in total there are 24 character strengths and 6 virtues. Now when we also use another term, sometimes people also synonymously use it with strengths, something called as talents. We'll discuss more also this in the next lecture. So how do you differentiate character strengths with talents? Now talents is something more innate. So you may have some innate ability to do something. Somebody may be very innate, there may be some talent for say painting or something like that. So this is like more of an talent side thing. There is some inner already capability somebody has. It's more innate. That capability is already comes out of the inner abilities that the person has. Character strengths are less innate. more we develop them as we grow in our life. So they are less innate. There may be some innate aspect to it, but it is less innate as compared to talents. When you talk about character strength, these are like more voluntary. You learn them, you exercise them, and so on. Talents are less voluntary. You have certain talents, or you don't have it. You don't have much control over them. Character strengths are morally valued, as we said. People expect these things from other people, so they are highly desirable qualities. These are talents may not have anything to do with the morality and so on. So you may be good at painting or something like so. There is nothing moral or immoral about it. Character strengths are more buildable. You can build them more because you have more control over them. Talents are less buildable in a sense. Obviously, you can refine them, which we'll be talking about in the next lecture, more about talents. But sometimes if you don't have certain talent, it is difficult to really build them, because certain innate capabilities has to be there. Character strengths are less tangible consequences. In terms of productivity and other things, they may not be of much direct reflection of that. Like forgiveness, kindness, and other things, these are very good in the emotional sense and the quality of life, but they may not have direct outcome in terms of performance and other thing. There are certain character strengths they have. We'll be talking about that. But talents have a very, they're valued more for their tangible consequence. They will have very strong consequence in one's performance and life situations, like, building wealth and acclaim and so on. So somebody has artistic talent, leadership talent, so their impact will be much more visible in life as compared to character strengths. So these are some of the differences. Now, how do you assess character strength in psychology or positive psychology? Because they do a lot of research with character strengths. So for research, you have to measure them and understand how do you measure that somebody has what character strengths they have. So there are different ways to measure it. One way is that, there is something called as a VIA inventory of strengths. So it's like a specific measurement instrument or questionnaire which was developed after doing all this research, and based on this VIA classification system, so they develop an inventory which can be filled by people, and then the scores can be generated for different strengths they have. So it is designed for adults and has been administered in 5 different versions to nearly about 350,000 people from over 200 countries. So this data may be little older. Obviously, this number is growing. So they are doing, because it is available in their website, and they are using it for research purpose and so on. So people across different cultures have used this questionnaire to measure what kind of strength they have, character strengths. So it is a straightforward questionnaire that assesses how much respondent agree with statements representing different character strengths in the classification system that we discussed, using a scale from 1 to 5. So whether that strength they are very much unlike to me, means this strength doesn't exist for them, 2, 5, very much like me, and in between there are 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. So people can give a agreement to what extent it is present in their life, and based on that certain scores can be generated. So this is more like a self-report measure. So each strength is represented by 10 items, totaling 240 items for each character strengths. For instance, the strengths of forgiveness is measured with statements such as, I always allow other people to leave their mistakes in the past and make fresh start. Something related to those strengths, and people are asked to whether they agree with this or not. Another statement is, I believe it is best to forgive and forget. I am unwilling to accept apologies, reverse code. So there are certain items which are reversely worded so that if people should not mindlessly just score. So there may be some items which are reverse scored. If somebody is mindlessly just filling, that means they will be caught here if they just give similar type of score and so on, because one has to understand the sentence and then accordingly they have to fill and so on. So like that. So this is one very popular measures for adults. Another VIA inventory of strength was also developed for youth specifically, which was developed by Nansuk Park. It is designed for individuals aged from 10 to 17 years of old. So similar to the earlier instrument, it is straightforward questionnaire that assesses how much respondent agree. The structure is very similar, only the items are different. Some items are different. So VIA Youth was created by adapting the items of age appropriate with 5 to 9 items per strength, resulting in a total of 198 items. So items are less here, fewer than the VIA IS, to minimize burden on young respondent. So thousands of young people across the United States have completed the VIA Youth questionnaire, either as a paper and pencil survey or through online platform, where parental and guardian consent is required for participation in the research and so on. So these are like, again, one can get scores and understand the different strengths, the dynamics of strengths within each individuals and so on. Some also researchers use something called as a structured interview, VIA structured interview, where they don't give specific statement, rather they interview people and ask certain questions, and based on their responses they can understand what kind of strength they have. So here it is with the assistance of Tiffany Sawyer, the VIA structure interview was created to identify signature strengths. What are the main strengths people have? Signature strength means most common strength used by that person. By discussing situations in which these strengths are most likely to emerge. So they are asked different situations in life and how they have dealt, and based on that it is identified. So some strengths only become apparent when some situation arises in one life. Otherwise, that strengths are not expressing in most of the time, but certain crisis happens, then a lot of strengths comes out. So they asked such kind of questions to understand what kind of strength they have. For instance, bravery can only be demonstrated in the face of fear, and forgiveness requires when somebody has wronged you. Only then forgiveness becomes important. For other situations, this may not get expressed. Conversely, other strengths like kindness or playfulness can be displayed consistently without any specific circumstances. Some strengths like kindness and so on may be generally experienced or expressed by people in normal day-to-day circumstances. Some specific strengths requires extraordinary situations. So in this whole interview, they ask different situations and different, let's say, imaginary situations or certain situation they faced, and based on that they will find out this person has these strengths and so on. And now this VIA structure interview may take about 30 minutes to complete. The interview responded how the person usually act in a given circumstances vis-a-vis the character strengths, whatever they use and focus. If appropriate, the setting is detailed, and in the case of strengths and otherwise the situation is described as everyday life. So if the participant indicates that they display the strength most of the time, follow-up questions are also asked: how they label the strength, whether the strength truly reflects their core identity, and whether friends and family would agree or not. So like this, they asked probes, find out certain strength, and then they do further probing to really identify whether these are core strengths or not. So like this kind of interviews are also done to understand strengths of people. Research shows that most adult possesses about 2 to 5 signature strengths, which are reflected in their the questionnaire measure also. So most of this interview also shows 2 to 5 core strengths a lot of people have, most of the people have, which is called as a signature strengths. However, structure interview has a limitation in the sense you cannot get a score out of it because this is very subjectively done. Does not provide any quantitative assessment of the individual strengths. However, it compensates the advantage is that VIA structure interview enables us to determine whether a strength is consciously recognized or embraced by the individual. So this helps. Through interview, one can understand actually this person is recognizing it consciously and using it and not. So from that person's perspective, it is more elaborate understanding can be gained from such interviews. So these are some of the ways by which strength can be measured for research purpose or even for self-exploration and so on. Now let us briefly look at how character strengths has been linked to well-being. In what ways they are important for our well-being. Some of the research finding we'll just discuss here. So character strengths have been consistently linked to various measures of happiness and well-being. Identifying and using signature strength means your core strengths, 2-3 core strengths, whatever the people have, when they identify it and they use it more and more in their life, everyday life, can lead to psychological fulfillment. So such strength, when they use and recognize them and use them more and more, it leads to a lot of psychological fulfillment in their life. certain strengths are more strongly related to well-being and flourishing, such as gratitude, hope, jest, curiosity, and love have been consistently related to life satisfaction. So some of these character strengths, there are 24 out of these, few of them research shows are more strongly related to happiness and life satisfactions of people, such as gratitude, hope, jest, curiosity, and love. So these are many others are also important, but these are research shows more strongly related. Research also indicate that strengths of heart means certain strengths that are related to emotions and heart qualities, such as love and gratitude, which connects people. So these strengths are connected to connecting to people. These are related to connecting with other people. So that is why they are called strengths of heart. Research shows this kind of strengths like gratitude, love, kindness, those kind of character strengths are strongly related to well-being as compared to strengths of head, means strength related to only thought processes such as creativity, critical thinking, and so on. So people may have strength in so many dimensions, but character strengths are more typically related to, a lot of these are connected to heart qualities like emotions and connecting with other people. They found these heart related strengths are more important for well-being as compared to just strengths of thought processes or strength of head like critical thinking or creativity and so on. They are important in other aspects, but for emotional well-being, strengths of heart are more important. This is what research shows. So which are mostly individual, strength of head are mostly individual in nature. So whether you show creativity, critical thinking, it has nothing to do with how do you connect with other people. So therefore, formal education should encourage both types of strength for holistic development. Now the problem mostly what it happens is that most of the education system is only related to strength of head. They teach you how to think and how to critically think and to some extent creativity maybe. But education system doesn't focus on strengths of heart. There is no focus on that, and the research shows they are actually more important in terms of well-being of life. So this thing has to be integrated in the education system. Both strengths of heart and strength of head, both should be integrated for holistic development of children. So that is something probably missing in today's education system. So this research shows both are very important. Specifically for well-being, strength of heart are more important. Research also shows the character strengths of perseverance, love, gratitude, hope, and persistence have been linked to academic achievement. Even though some of these strengths of heart, they may be more emotional in nature, connection with other people, but research also shows they are actually related to some even achievement also, because they may help you to find the right perspective and thinking, right support from other people, and may facilitate achievement also like academic achievement and so on. Strengths of bravery and appreciation of beauty is connected with the successful recovery from illnesses. These are specific researches. So this specific strength like bravery or appreciation of beauty has been found to be more beneficial for, let's say, something like recovery from illnesses and so on. Spirituality, religiousness is associated with meaning of life and purpose. People who are more into spiritual domain of life or some aspect of religiousness, such people report more meaning in their life, more purpose in their life and so on. So like this, different strength may serve different functions. They may have different outcomes and so on. Now the last question that is important is that can we cultivate character strength? Is it possible to enhance them? We all may have certain strengths which we may use them to some extent, but the more important applied question is can we enhance them? So let us address this question. So everybody has signature strengths, some strength which may, 2-3 strengths we all have, regardless of where he or she may stand compared to others. So as compared to others, one may be low, high, that is all possibilities are there, but still we all have some signature strengths. Now whether that signature strength I may have less as compared to, let's say, another person and so on. So that comparison things, that variation will be there. But regardless of that, we all have those strengths. Now this signature strength can be cultivated as we already possess them, and it is easier to enhance them by exercising them in our daily life. Now research shows that these signature strengths, whatever strength we have related to character strength, they can be enhanced. Because this is how we learn them actually more by learning them only. Since we all have them within all of us, these strengths are already there, they can be only enhanced. So it is very easy to develop strength, because strengths, whenever we use strength, we feel happy, because this is something where we are good at it, or it is an inbuilt thing that, or within all of us, this is there, and we want to express them. So there is, people are generally automatically motivated to express strength, because whenever we develop express strength, we feel happy because we are good at those things. On the other hand, we feel defensive when we have weaknesses within all of us. So it is much more difficult to work on weakness, as people lose interest and defensive about them. Weakness means you are not good at, you are not able to do something, so that becomes your weakness. People many times don't even accept they have weaknesses, and even if they accept, they become defensive about them. They don't want to process them properly and develop them, and so on. So weaknesses always creates problems in terms of learning, or kind of removing them, or working on the weakness is not so easy because of inherent problem that we don't want to recognize them. We become defensive about them. We don't want to accept that we have weaknesses. But strength is very different. We want to acknowledge that we have strength. We want to express it. We want to accept that we have strengths. So it is much more easier, automatic in terms of motivation. We can develop them much better way and faster them, as compared to working on the weaknesses. So in a study, it was observed that people who use their signature strength for a week in a novel ways, means they use their signature strength in varieties of ways, increased happiness and decreased depression at 6 months follow-up, as compared to the control group, means who have not used them. So these are some of the specific research that showed using them at least consciously and in a varieties of ways, finding more expression in day-to-day life, that led to, even for 1 week, increase their happiness level substantially and decrease their depression level. This change was even visible after 6 months also. These character strengths are relatively stable and trait-like, because when we say something is character strength, it has to be stable. We cannot say fluctuating characteristics cannot be called as a character strength. But however, they can be influenced, so by both genetics and environmental factors. Some of the factors which can influence character strength we'll be talking here in terms of how they can be influenced. So one is, research shows that dramatic events can increase character strength. Sometimes when some dramatic event or very impactful event happens in one's life, like some negative things or traumatic things, then in those situations, after facing those situations, people generally develop more strengths. For example, research shows that character strengths of faith or religiousness, hope and love were elevated among US responded after 9/11 attack. So a lot of people actually, this strength increased within them after 9/11 attack, which was a very impactful event, which kind of shattered people's lot of ideas and so on. So collectively, a lot of people, actually a lot of this strength increased, the research shows. Like religiousness, they become much more religious, hope, love, and all this actually increased. So sometimes some kind of dramatic event can actually increase some of these character strengths for some people. Increase in the strengths of bravery, kindness, and humor after recovery from physical illness. Many people also report like very serious illnesses when they face and struggle with that. After that, people report more strengths such as bravery, kindness, humor after facing them. So such kind of event also becomes a stimulation for increasing certain strengths. Increases in the character strengths of religiousness, gratitude, kindness, hope, and bravery after exposure to trauma. After facing traumatic event, a lot of these character strengths such as religiousness, gratitude, kindness, and hope also seems to, research shows that they also increased among people. So these various notions about virtue imply that character can be cultivated by also sometimes some extreme environmental events or traumatic events can also facilitate. Also, character strength can be cultivated by good parenting, schooling, and socialization. Because a lot of these strengths or character strengths we develop by looking at other people, learning from other people, and so on. And the first is obviously parenting, what kind of virtues and lessons we get from parents in the schools, and overall from the socialization around in our society. All these things will slowly help us to develop these characteristics. Positive role models may promote development of good characters. Something is very important. What kind of role model we take? If you take some people or idealize some people, if they also show certain good characters, naturally you will also get influenced by them, and accordingly you will also develop those characters. Now, people should be taught specific activities of strengths and encourage them to keep using them in their daily life. So, the more you use those character strengths, the more obviously they also increases. So, those character strengths. So, the more you use them, more they become visible in one's life. So, an individualized program for cultivating character based on an individual's character strengths profile may be more effective than a general for everyone. Obviously, for developing this character strength in terms of specific interventions, we cannot have a very general thing. We need to understand the different character strengths the person has, and accordingly it can be customized for that person. So, these are some of the ways by which character strength is influenced in our life, and they can be promoted in our life. Now, one of the things that take away from all this is that using character strengths more and more in newer ways in our day-to-day life enhances those strengths. So, let us see little bit more about this using signature strengths in new ways. Signature strength means those few important strengths which are very dominant in one's life. So, people generally possesses signature strengths similar to personal traits. So, we all have certain signature strengths. These strengths are core aspect of our character, qualities that individuals recognize, take pride in, and often utilize. Research shows that nearly everyone can easily identify few key strengths, typically between 2 to 5. From the list, everybody can identify 2 to 5 signature strengths which are like very common or dominant among them. Those are called as a signature strengths. Some of the possible criteria for signature strength, obviously one can identify this strength using those questionnaires and so on, but some of the other expression of this signature strength is that if you possess a signature strengths, this will be some of the characteristics of it. So, if you possess some signature strengths, so there will be a sense of ownership and authenticity. You will naturally feel this is my real me when you express them. So, when let's say when you show kindness to someone, it feels like this is how you are. You are naturally kind to people. So it's like there will be a sense of ownership, and you will be very authentic in that kindness. It will not be a fake kindness. So signature strength will be whenever you use them. So this will be one of the characteristics, that there will be a sense of ownership and authenticity. There will be a feeling of excitement while displaying particular at first. So initially when you show some of the character strengths which is your signature strength, you will feel a lot of excitement in displaying it and feel happy about it, because this is a very positive expression of yourself. Another thing is that there is a rapid learning curve as themes are attached to the strengths and practice. So if something is your strength, you will be very easily learn them and very quickly learn them. So there will be rapid learning. So because this is your strength, so anything that is aligned to your strength, you will learn it very fast. So that is another expression to it. So there will be continuous learning for new ways to enact the strengths. You will also, because strength is something that you want to express them more and more. So there is a possibility of continuous learning it more and in new ways and try to enact those strengths more and more. There is also a sense of yearning to act in accordance with the strengths. You are more likely to, or there is a yearning within yourself. You want to express them more and more. So strengths always wants to come out and express itself. Another thing is that a feeling of inevitable in using the strength, as if one cannot be stopped or dissuaded from its display. So there will be a sense of feeling of inevitable. So this is something, it will anyway come out. The discovery of the strength as owned in an epiphany. Sometimes we discover some strength as if, miraculously you discover, something that, okay, this is real me, and it can come as an epiphany. There is an invigorating rather than exhaustion when using the strength. Whenever you use the strength, you feel more energized rather than, exhausted by it. There is a sense of happiness involved in it. The creation and pursuit of fundamental projects that revolve around the strength. So people are also more likely to pursue projects and actions and which will revolve around your strengths. People would like to do that. And the last one is there is an intrinsic motivation to use the strength. So Generally, there is an internally we want to express those strengths intrinsically, because strength is something that we all like to express them because we are good at those things. So these are some of the expression or criteria by which we can understand whether something is our signature strength or not. If these characteristics are present, we can say most probably this is our signature strength. If any strength is associated with any of this or some of these expressions. So using signature strengths in new ways, the more you use them, shown to have long-term positive effects on happiness. The more you use them, more happier you feel. Here are some of the specific recommendations drawn from the list developed by Jonathan Haidt, as well as Tayyab Rashid and Afroz Anjum. So there's a list that, for example, this, just to give you some example, how can we, let's say, if you find out certain specific character strengths as your signature strength, how can you use them in a varieties of way or in new ways to develop them? These are some of the examples that I will be listing now. For example, authenticity and honesty. You find your one of the strength is authenticity or honesty. How can I use them more in day-to-day life so that then you enhance them? For example, to increase that, you can refrain from telling white lies to friends. So to increase authenticity, try to avoid telling lies as much as possible, especially. So that will increase your sense of authenticity and honesty. Show it more and more if you have that strength. Even if situation is very compelling, try to refrain from telling lies. Think about your most important values and do something every day that is consistent with them. So authenticity means what? So if you value something, try to do something about it every day, and your behavior should be inconsistent with that. So if you value something, you should not just talk about it, your action also has to be oriented towards it. So then your authenticity will increase. When explaining your motives to someone, do so in a genuine and honest way. When you express them, if you honesty and authenticity is your quality, show them in your expression also, in your explanation to someone also. So basically in your words, in your work actions, the things should be reflected. The more you reflect them in life situations, more it will develop. Let's say bravery. If it is your signature strength, how to use it in a varieties of ways. One is speak up for an unpopular ideas in a group. So that is also needs bravery, let's say. If everybody is saying something and something is unpopular but still it has to be spoken, stand up and speak. So that will also increase your sense of bravery. Protest to the appropriate authorities about a clear injustice that you observe. Whenever such situation arises, when injustice happens, try to stand up and protest about it. If bravery is something that is your signature strength. Do something that you ordinarily would not do because of fear. So many times we don't do a lot of things because of fear, but try to do some of these things which were being stopped by fear to increase your bravery and so on. So these are some of the ways, suggestions about specific strengths. Forgiveness, for example, let a grudge go every day. Every day try to, if you have some grudges against people or about anything, every day try to forgive that one. One by one at least. So that will increase your your strengths of forgiveness. When you feel annoyed, even with justification, take the high road and do not tell anyone how you feel. So even if you feel annoyed and negative, even it is justified, take the high road and do not tell anyone how you feel. So basically, don't expose or kind of impose your problems and emotions on others. Write a few forgiveness letter. Do not send it, but do read it every day for a week. So even if you are not able to send or directly sell, at least write about it if you want to forgive something or somebody. That also kind of help you to process and mentally grow in terms of forgiveness. Gratitude, some of the ways could be keep track of how many times you say thank you during the day and increase number of every day. So basically try to express more and more gratitude wherever situation is available. At the end of every day, write down 3 things that went well and you are grateful for those things. Write and send a gratitude letter to some people whom you want to thank and so on. So these things will enhance your sense of gratitude. Curiosity, for example, attend a lecture on topic about which you know nothing or less. So curiosity can be expressed in so many ways, or it can be developed by reading about or attending lectures about topics which you don't know much. Go to restaurant featuring cuisines unfamiliar to you, discover new place in your town and learn about its history. So curiosity will be expressed in those terms, but more specific suggestion how it can be done. Some of these things can be expressed like that. So these are some of the ways by which we can actually cultivate various character strengths or signature strengths. And the research has shown the more you use them, the more happier and emotional well-being will come. So with this, I stop here. Thank you.